Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a very special guest back on for the second time, Jeff Alberts. He actually was on early in the podcast, episode 26, so early on. But again, this will be his second time back on. So Jeff, appreciate you coming on. Just real quick, if you guys aren't familiar with Jeff, he's the head coach and co-founder of 3DMJ. He started lifting weights back in 1986 and has competed in natural bodybuilding since 1993. So brings a ton of experience and wisdom. So looking forward to kind of picking his brain on some things and maybe some things that have changed over the last few years for him. So Jeff, again, appreciate your time and thank you for coming back on.
Oh, thank you for having me on. Good introduction. Makes me feel that much older, but yeah, hey.
Not old by any means, man. Just wanted to share, you got the wisdom, right? I think that's important, the experience and the wisdom. It's not like you've been doing this for a
I
couple years.
I hope so. No pressure, right? Like bringing me
Right.
on the podcast second time. I got to deliver. We'll see. So
Yep. It's like a second date. We had a long little break in between there, but it's second date nonetheless, right?
yeah, let's make it happen.
Yep. Cool. Well, yeah, so like I said, I mean, that was I think sometime in probably 2021 that you were on. So, if you just want maybe some life updates and then we can kind of roll into like the training and that type of thing. I don't know if anything's happened for you over the last few years, big like that or yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I guess the big news is I did Worlds last year. So WNBF Worlds in November. Didn't do the Masters division. I kept it up with the young guys. So
Awesome.
and I was able to take a top five. I actually got fifth. So all the guys ahead of me were like half my age from different parts of the world. So it was a pretty awesome experience. So that's kind of the latest news. Currently dealing with some injury, so that's making me feel a little bit older. So a few months ago, I felt like real young and really, just getting after it. But now I'm like kind of banged up a little bit. But I'm doing okay, and family's doing good. That's the main thing. And as far as our coaching business and all that, we're doing pretty well. So overall, yeah, I can't complain.
Awesome. Curious on the injuries. Yeah, I mean, I do want to talk to you about the worlds and stuff like that, but just real quick on the injuries, since that's on the top of my mind, what are you kind of dealing with there?
I have a low back issue and sciatica,
Okay.
and I don't have a full like exactly what's going on there, but I'm pretty confident I have a bulging disc, just because of that sciatica issue. So this is like my fourth week dealing with it. It's improving, like from a pain perspective, it's improved dramatically, but I just have a lot of muscle tightness and loss of strength, like on the right side in my hamstring and calf. But I'm working around it as far as my training. I haven't seen any muscle loss or anything like that, so that's a good thing. But it's just a little bit frustrating when you can't do the same things you're always doing. So it's a little bit of a learning curve here with a little bit older body, banged up body. But that's what I love about this sport is you continually learn and evolve over time. So I don't look at it as just a complete negative. There's a little bit of positive that can come out of it. But yeah, we can always touch on that as far as training and all that
Yeah,
later. But
no,
yeah, but I'm doing all right. Yeah, hanging in there.
yeah, that's super interesting, that you bring that up where it's like, you think something like an injury, for example, because I think last time we talked, you did have some, like you've been training since, the 80s, like you've had some injuries since then, right? I don't think it's like, feasible to not have any injury
Right.
whatsoever. So, we kind of talk about that, but it is interesting that you bring up, as you kind of, again, but like I said, you're not old by any means, but, as you age, you've been doing this for a while, like you kind of do have to probably change how you go about training through injuries and things like that. That's something that, each time you go through, it's like you learn it, but you also have to apply, it probably changes with that. What are some things there? Like, I know you said you're kind of working around, like, is it anything else that you maybe have to focus on from like things outside of the gym or yeah, I guess how did like exercise you have to do specifically or yeah, what does that look like?
So, I mean, the root cause of this, it's hard to say just to pinpoint like, okay, it was one thing that
Yeah.
did this. One change I did was like once my prep was over with, I got the itch like, oh, I want to squat again. So let me squat. So I did a light session and like super slow rep cadence just to make sure I'm, good quality form is there. No pain doing it. Next day I was like, oh, I feel a little something in the right side of my lower back. But it didn't prevent me from like training thereafter. I stopped squatting though. I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't squat. So I stopped and I just kept training. And then it just like after one leg day, it was fine during the leg session. The next day, though, like severe pain. So I don't know if it was like the squat started it or it's a combination of the squat. I am 52, closer to 53 now with 38 years of training. So, just some wear and tear that's going on. Coming off of prep, my body's maybe a little bit more beat up. Like all these things, it's like hard to say. It might just be a plethora of things. But once I kind of got that pain, I'm like, okay, like I knew better than to just not get myself immobile. Like I need to make sure I'm still walking and stretching. So I kept up with all that. I consulted with our PT, Dr. Nicola Camelli. He kind of gave me some stretches. So we were testing some things out, which ones I could do paid free, that type of thing. So I kind of fell into a good rhythm as far as like what I could do stretching wise, walking wise. Like I can go about maybe 20 to 30 minutes without stopping to where I'm like, okay, I need to kind of just back off here. And then just learning what I can do in the gym. Like he basically told me, like, just keep training. Like, let's find exercise we can do that because we don't want to stop training. So yeah, it took me about 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get into a groove with that. And this week, finally, I have like a good routine going, like where I'm doing exercises pain free. I'm just not loading my spine, basically. Like lower body is like I can do split squats without loading my spine, unilateral leg curls, and I can do hip thrusts with like a really slow rep cadence and body weight calf raises. And what's interesting on the calf raises, I can't do one calf raise on my right foot. Can't even get off the ground. Like there's just no strength there at all. But I can like doing bilateral, I can get off the ground. So at least I'm still getting some tension on that right leg. But yeah, just like that first week was brutal. Like I was in pain 24/7. And now I'm like slowly kind of being able to do these things. Like it's getting better. And when I did research a little bit on this issue, it's like like disc bulges, things like that. It says like anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks recovery. So I'm only in the fourth week. And then of course I went to the doctor already, got x-rays, and he's giving me some things to do. So doesn't see if I don't see improvement in the next couple of weeks, I'll probably go back to the doctor and go with the next step.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's super frustrating. Like you said, it just takes time too, I mean, like you said, it's only
Mhm.
been 4 weeks. It's not like it's been, like you said, 12 weeks, like 6 to 12 weeks. But I'll tell you what, anytime you're injured, I feel like the weeks they double at that point in terms of how long they feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it mentally, I think, like for me personally, mentally, it's more of a struggle than physically. Like, yeah, pain, it's not fun, but I can deal with it. But it's more mental, like knowing like shit, I'm not 100%, can't do the same things I always do. And it's easy to like get focused on the negative side of things. So I've kind of learned over the years, like through other injuries, like I don't want to get myself in a negative place. I'm like, let me focus on what I can do, not on what I can't. So that first day, even though the pain was pretty intense, like my mind went to what can I do, not so much what I can't. Okay, now let me be proactive. And then that way I know if I do that, then I'm going to be further along as far as like the road to recovery. But it is challenging though. There are moments though where you're just like, man, this is draining. It's like the pain at times does kind of drain you. And then just knowing like you got a long road ahead, it can be draining, but I just try to stay positive. Like when I had a calf tear back in 20, like that taught me a lot about patience and approach with training because that definitely changed my approach to training. It humbled me because prior to that, it was more about like chasing loads and a little more ego training. So it kind of just shifted perspective on the approach. And that's why I'm still doing this thing at 52 and going to worlds at 52 because I changed up that approach.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, some of these things that happen to you if you can, like you said, kind of have, not I think sometimes maybe the positive mindset gets taken too far, but if you can have a positive approach and again, like you said, kind of focus on the things you can control and work on, it helps. And like in your specific example, like you said, if you wouldn't have had that calf tear, which I'm sure during the time that sucked and it probably felt detrimental, but like you said, if anything, it helped you kind of extend your career and be able to go longer because you kind of changed your approach and
Yeah,
everything. So like you said, looking at it in a positive light is always a good thing there. And
that's
help to get you where you're at now. So
for sure. Yeah, it's a lesson. Anything we do, it's a lesson.
I think too, the other kind of cool takeaway from that too is like, you did injure, and a lot of times when people hear that, they think like, oh, I just need to stop doing everything, right? But like your like the PT said, hey, keep lifting, need to keep doing things. Because if not, things will probably get worse, and who knows, like also from a mental standpoint, training is probably super important to you, and well, it is. Obviously you're still still doing it, so like from a mental perspective, it can be helpful there as well too. So I'm glad to hear that the advice there is, hey, keep training through these injuries, like obviously work around it, but make sure you're still doing something.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yep, cool. So I guess upper body is all like no issues there, you're able to kind of train that is normal, or
as long as I'm like making sure my back isn't stabilizing. So what I've discovered there is like incline Smith bench, just in that position there. It's not too much burden on my lower back. So that kind of covers my chest. A little bit of delt work, obviously triceps. And then I do a torso cable supported row. So that way it's, you could kind of say it's like a seal row in a way where it's like no pressure on your legs, low back. I'm doing torso supported dumbbell laterals. So kind of just letting all my body weight hang on the bench while I'm doing laterals. And I could do like a tricep press on the Smith bench. So again, I'm laying down and I do incline dumbbell curls and again, sitting down. So it's like basically just taking everything off my lower back. So those exercises are just covering the ground and covering the basis now. So, and I'm progressive. That's the thing. I found exercises that I can do safely and I can actually load it and progressively load it, whether it's, weight or reps or what have you. I could push myself still because my main objective, of course, is to recover, but I don't want to lose muscle mass. Even though I'm getting older, it's like, yeah, I want to hang on to this as much as possible. I worked hard for a long time to get to where I'm at now. I don't want to just let it go. So again, being positive, focusing on what I can do, finding what I can do, and then kind of just rolling with it. And then of course being reactive too. Like I can't just be married to this thinking it's going to work. Like it might work a week, it might work 2 weeks, might work a month. I don't know, but I have to stay aware and be reactionary.
Yep. Yeah. Make sure things aren't going downhill, and making sure you're kind of still, making sure you're not affecting that injury as much as possible. So it sounds like finding a lot of stability and support has kind of been the big thing there, with that, which makes sense. And, I guess for you then, like from a training perspective, have you had to, dial back like how many days you're training, or have you been able to kind of stick to that, with exercises that you've been able to find that will work for you?
Yeah, it's about the same, like 3 to 4 days a week. That's usually my sweet spot anyways. So I've been sticking like 3 to 4. I just know myself pretty well. Like anything more than 2 days in a row, whether I'm healthy or not, it usually ends up being counterproductive because I just don't recover well. So I just basing it more so on life schedule than anything.
Yeah.
And like far as like the amount of volume I'm doing, it's just based on the session experience. If I feel good, get good energy, no pain, I can do an extra set, great. If not, then I'll just cap it.
For you, what do you feel like typically will cause you to maybe not feel as good going into training sessions? I mean, I'm sure at this point now you got years of experience, and again, not only experience, but you also, really monitor these things and pay attention. What do you typically find that like kind of impacts your recovery and yeah, whatnot going into your
Probably
sessions?
the main thing, like when I'm not dieting for shows, like the main thing is lack of sleep and stress. Those two things. Because I'm well fed. Right now my body fat level's high enough and enough calories coming in. It's usually not a food issue. It's more so just maybe a sleep or a stress issue, or in this case, like, maybe some aches and pains. But generally, yeah, it's just like diet related. It's only when I'm prepping.
Yeah, not bringing in enough food during the diet. So sleep and stress for you. Do you find that like sleep, is it just day to day like is there anything there that will cause you to get bad sleep, or just a random night here and there? Just typical things like that.
It's typical of what everybody experiences, life stuff. It could be like, oh, I have a bill due in 3 days. I gotta pay that. It could be little things like that, or it could just be, something going on with my son where it's like, hey, he's got a lot going on with karate. So I'm running around. So it's like that can cause a little bit of sleep disruption, staying up late. What I try not to do is sit there on my phone. Like I'm not like sitting there on Instagram like 20 minutes before, I'm going to sleep. But yeah, it's just typically, stress related stuff most of the time. Prep, I was having some sleep issues. That was more diet related though. Like obviously just being deprived of food. But generally, like on average, I'm getting anywhere between 7 to 8 hours. Most nights, I would say majority of the time it's 7 though. If I get like I have a general rule for myself. Like if I don't get 6 hours sleep, I don't train the next day, even if it is a training day. Because what I've learned through experience is even if I train through it, like, yeah, I can force it in there. But chances are I'm going in tired. Performance may or may not be good. And then usually after that, I feel even worse. So the recovery is just like, it's just almost like a snowball effect. Like you just get more fatigued. So it's like my cutoff is 6 hours. Like anything under that, don't train. That way, just get a good night's sleep the next night, make sure I'm well fed, make sure I'm, and then get after it the next day.
Yeah. So looking at, if you got a poor night's sleep, hey, I'm not even gonna try to push it. Again, you've learned over time for yourself not to push that. You end up kind of feeling worse. On those days, what do you typically just kind of I'm sure you still do some sort of activity, or what does that typically look like when you kind of take those off days from the gym?
My activity is going for a walk. Someone else might be, I don't know, going for a bike ride or playing tennis or whatever. It's like I just don't exert myself too much. I don't like do something extreme. Like obviously when I train, like a lot of my exercises, they're going close to failure. So yeah, it's definitely going to tax your CNS far more than if I'm going for a walk or playing a pickup game of basketball or something like that.
Yeah. Do you do any like dedicated cardio or anything like that? Like on the bike or anything? It sounds like based on what you said there, you don't, but have you ever?
No, not right now. Yeah, I'm just walking. Prep, I do get on some cardio sometimes. Like I'll go between bike and brisk walking. I was doing some pretty good bike rides there during prep, like hour at a time, going for miles. It was pretty fun. Nothing crazy though. It's not like I'm going heck of fast, but I'm good cruising speed. Sometimes the wind hits your face. You're just like, okay, this is hard. But that's about the extent of my cardio these days.
Is that just when you do that in prep? Is that just to expend a little bit more energy and stuff like that? Get a little bit more, yeah,
Not
energy
so much from
expenditure
it.
going?
Yeah, not so much from an energy expenditure, more so like from what I learned in 2019 with that prep, like I was just doing steps and I ended up getting severe tibialis tendonitis in
Mm.
my down close to my ankle and I could barely walk. I got to a point like it was a day before the show, like I didn't know if I was gonna be able to actually get on stage and pose. It was that inflamed, like super swollen. And so I kind of learned from that point, like, okay, I need to basically kind of switch this up. And who would have thought like you could actually get an injury just walking? But it's like you can if it's repetitive enough. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I started shifting. I do a week of cycling, a week of walking, or 2 weeks cycling, 2 weeks walking, or every other day I'd switch it back and forth depending on the weather and all that. So with this prep, that's what I was basically doing. Like I was kind of just shifting back and forth.
Yeah, just I guess kind of maybe to get it sounds like you just kind of ran into some repetitive use kind of
Mhm.
overuse. What was your like step count like?
At that point, it was 15 to 18,000 steps a day. And I
Pretty
was
good
doing
amount.
like 2 walks a day. Like in the morning, I'd walk, and then the late afternoons, I'd go for a second walk. And also learned like, okay, let's time my prep a little bit better because that was the first show of the season. And I was really trying to make a hard push to actually make it. I knew I wasn't going to be 100% ready. I was like, let me just get to be 90%. It's like the last 7, 8 weeks leading to that show, it was just really just pushing probably a little too hard than I needed to be. So whereas this last prep, my step count on average, like the highest I should say, was like 10 to 12,000, maybe 14 at the highest, a couple days here and there, but for the most part, a lot lower than where it was in 2019. And that was just because I paced it out better.
Yeah, pace it out. Yeah, all right. Cool. Do you like track anything for like recovery or anything like resting heart rate, anything, or do you kind of pay attention to that type of stuff, or you again just kind of go off of subjective feeling and how you feel?
I'm not one of those gadget guys. Like, cause it's like I'm gonna pay more attention to a gadget than basically how I'm feeling.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's like sometimes, like with this last, here's a good example. This last prep, probably about 3 or 4 months of it, I wasn't weighing myself at all. Everybody's like, how are you not weighing yourself? And how do you know when to make adjustments? These types of things. So there was two reasons why. One, like I didn't want the stressors of like just seeing numbers.
yeah,
And then two, I wanted to stay more connected with actually what I was actually experiencing. Because sometimes when you're focused on a scale, the numbers, you're focused on, you know, just a specific, like tracking your training, you're looking at all the logbooks and all that. It's like you're more focused on a spreadsheet and numbers than you are what you're actually experiencing, what you're actually feeling. And I'm not saying like someone who's prepping for the first time or even second time, like it's a good idea not to keep track of your data but someone like myself who's been doing this forever, it's like I don't need to like have these numbers constantly. I can look in the mirror and see if I'm actually visually making changes. I know when I'm more hungry than when I'm not hungry. I know when I'm like more energetic or less energetic. So based on how I was feeling is how I was making adjustments. So if I look like I'm, seeing some visual changes, great. I know I don't need to change anything. If I'm not feeling like hungry at all and I'm pretty energetic, like, well, I can probably, lower calories down a little bit and push a little harder right now. So it's just a lot of, using auto regulation and little push and pull. So, but yeah, I think sometimes it's like at some point it's a good idea to get away from like looking at your phone constantly looking for your answers. It's like, man, how do you think bodybuilders back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s did these things and still had pretty good physiques?
it's funny you bring that up because I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger was on Jocko's podcast, so I was like, you know what, I'm going to listen to this, and he was kind of talking about his experience, and like he was just saying basically they told him like three months out, like just stop eating dessert after your meals, and like that was like basically like what he did to like change his diet. It wasn't like, hey, here's his macros. He just made that
Yeah.
that small change like that, and that did it. So like you said there, it's like they didn't do any of this,
It's a
types.
system. It's a different system. It's doing the same thing. Like they have a system, they're following it, it's consistent. They assess it. Okay, I'm gonna make a when I need to make a change, I'll make a change. I'll make the change and then I go. I remember, I'll see, this was probably 2011, 2012, kind of like I first started coaching. I had an athlete that did not want to track macros. Just adamant and kind of an old school bodybuilder, like just, give me a meal plan type deal. But even then, it was like the way he was kind of measuring things, it was like it wasn't 100% accurate. It's like, how am I going to make an adjustment with this guy? So the way I prepped him was like I knew he was eating the same foods every day for the most part. So it's like, oh, you need to make a calorie cut. So I'll tell him, hey man, I need you to, instead of eating a whole potato, let's just eat a half. That's how we make the adjustments. And he got shredded, he got peeled, and it was successful. But that's like when I work with individuals, I'll cater like somewhat. Like if there's a lot of pushback, like, hey, I don't want to learn this, then like, hey, I'll try to encourage, hey, let's learn more. So
Yeah.
that's how you'll broaden yourself, you'll get better. But some people it's just like you have to find a system for them that they could adhere to and they're going to sustain and enjoy more so than like, hey, I'm going to make them cater to the system I want them to run to. So you kind of just meet in the middle a little bit.
Did you ever like track your macros in the past or anything like that at one point?
I didn't start tracking macros until 2011. No, I take that back. 2009. Yeah, up until that point, it was more like I would eat the same foods. Like I did the bro plan, same foods, meal plan. If I had to make a cut, I'll just shave some calories down. I didn't track macros perfectly, but I knew about where my calories were at.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah,
Yeah, just so didn't track it perfectly or anything like that, but you had an idea. And again, you kind of went off the system that you kind of
yeah.
had in place there. What about, I mean, so it sounds like again you didn't do that for your prep from what I understand, because you said you didn't even weigh yourself or anything. Did you track during your prep, and then like what does that kind of look like?
I tracked that calories. Yeah, I
Okay.
kept track of my calories. The macros, I didn't have perfect macros. It would be just ranges, but calorie target was high priority. Was protein was pretty consistent, and then fats and carbs would kind of just fluctuate. But yeah, as far as like weighing myself, like I did weigh myself the last month because I was having Alberto, who was one of our other coaches. I was letting him design my peak week, so he needed data in order to do that. So I
Yeah.
started tracking again. But yeah.
What does that look like compared to the off season? Do you track in the off season as well too, or do you kind of take some time away from it? And
Nah, I put the scale away. Yeah, scale is put away, but I mean, more or less, like the same habits are in place. Because during prep, I usually have 3 meals a day, sometimes four, and it doesn't change now that I'm off season. It's the same for the most part. My Monday through Friday looks very similar. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, just like a regular human being. On occasion, I might have something at night. The foods are relatively the same for those meals between prep and off season because I like the foods I eat. And I might have a snack here and there if I feel like it. And then on the weekends, it looks a lot different. It's very unpredictable because my wife is very unpredictable. She'll wake up and say, hey, let's go here. And I'm like, okay, let's go. And then I kind of just have to navigate myself. But I try to keep myself accountable. Things. One, of course, the bodybuilding side of things, but more importantly, like from a health perspective, I can't let myself go because I was diagnosed with high cholesterol a couple of years back. So it's like I have to make sure that I am paying attention to the amount of food I'm eating, the types of food I'm eating, and that keeps me accountable because I do want to be on planet Earth as long as I can.
yeah, looking not only, for now, but also long term,
Yeah.
there with that. So what were some things that you had to change, like diet wise, when you found out you had high cholesterol? Was there anything?
So context for that, yeah, at the time I found out, this was like the summer of 2021. I can't remember when we talked in 2021, but I was like 205 pounds and I'm like 5'8.5". So that's pretty
So,
big.
yep.
Yeah. And my body fat percentage was probably north of 20%. It was probably in the low 20s. And the diet habits at that time weren't the greatest. Like it was, yeah, I was having 3 to 4 meals a day, but I was also having a lot of snacks in between those meals and not the best kind of snacks, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
So yeah, just my LDL was like pretty high. Total cholesterol was pretty high. And I was like, okay, I need to change my habits here. So I started getting more active, doing more walks, cleaned up the diet, actually started prepping, and the numbers came down. Like I was doing blood work every 3 months because my doctor wanted to keep checking it, and it was coming down, and he wanted to prescribe a statin. And I was like, no, let me see if I can do this without
Yeah.
taking anything first. And I did get the numbers down, but not enough to where he felt comfortable. So eventually he put me on a statin. So I took like a medium dose statin to start with. About 6 months later, after, continuing to prep and all that, and he basically cut that in half. So like I'm on a very low dose now. So I'm just like really ingrained on keeping the same habits in place. Like I don't want to get myself back to 200 pounds. Like at this point of my life, it's like, what's the point of being 200 pounds?
Right.
At 52, 53, 38 years of training. It's not like it's going to expedite progress any further if I'm 200 pounds. It's like, let me just be at a healthy weight now. And as long as I'm lifting, I'm productive, the very least muscle is going to maintain. And I'm kind of proving that even now I'm banged up, not doing the things I want to do, doing enough to maintain it. So again, I don't need to be overly assertive or aggressive with the bodybuilding side of things right now.
Yeah. So when you got up to 200, was that like a something that you kind of like planned? Again, it's not, I mean, obviously that was in your off season and it sounds like that was like the peak. Was that planned or was that, again, I know you kind of said that you had like snacks in there that you were eating, stuff like that. So maybe it's a little unplanned, or did you kind of, or what,
Not
yeah.
not planned, but just how my body settles with those habits. Because in the past, that's where I would settle in my off seasons. I would settle anywhere between 195, 205. And, I got older. It's like I can't do that anymore. Because back when I first started bodybuilding, like in the early 90s, I started competing. A lot of times, like the approach was compete, get lean, get shredded, what have you. But then once the show's over with, you need to gain weight, eat. You need to eat, gain weight, get big again. Like you need to make some gains. So now it's a little bit different nowadays. Like there's more strategy involved. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna off season for 6 months. I'm gonna diet for 6 months. That's kind of how it was. Well, that becomes a habit. Then it's all good when you're in your 20s and maybe your 30s, but when you start getting your 40s and now 50, it's like, well, you can't keep eating pizza every weekend, man.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like you need to see it, especially with because a lot of this is genetics too. Like on my father's side, heart issues. Actually, my mom too, she passed away of heart issues. So it's just genetic. That's what my doctor said. It's like, hey, you cleaned all your habits up, you're active, your weight training, diet's good, but still not enough because of your family history. So he's like, I really want you to go on this statin. So of course, I had to really think hard about it, and I finally just gave in to him.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's yeah, super genetic there with that. It's like even if you have all your like you said, all the lifestyle training, everything like that dialed in, you're still at a higher risk for that. And it sounds like the moment you kind of just let things slip a little bit, it's like that's gonna, affect you more
Mhm.
than it would, somebody else. So where do you like to kind of sit now, like in your off season from a weight perspective? Is it more so for you just like getting to that weight, whatever it is, or is it like just being in a surplus, or do you not worried about being in a surplus at this point? Yeah.
Low 180s to mid 180s, which as far as stage weight is concerned, we're talking 17, 20 pounds over. It's a weight I feel good at, I look okay at, but it is a weight that I have to be mindful. Like I have to put effort in to maintain this because for me, it's so easy to it'll just go up. So if I don't have my calories in like let's say 2200 to 2500, that's where I need to be at to maintain this. Like that's not a ton of food for a guy my
No.
size. And that surprises a lot of people. They're like, man, you're that's not a lot of food for a guy your size, but I'm not super active. When I'm not prepping, my step count averages anywhere between 4 to 6,000 most days. Sometimes like on the weekends, it'll kick up 10,000 because I'll be more active, yard work, that type of stuff. So I could benefit maybe from a little more cardio, but finding that in my day is can be challenging at times, but it's just more about paying attention to the diet more than anything. So it does take effort.
Yeah, that is interesting. Definitely lower than I would have guessed for sure. But like you said, 4 to 6,000 steps, that sounds about right. And but again, I think it just goes to show too, like, you still like it's kind of funny how your body, kind of finds that spot or that sweet spot, where like you said, if you're not paying attention to food, it's like you start to see it trend up into the 200s. There with that, I'm sure people probably think you just can do whatever you want, nutrition wise, and it just kind of stays there.
Well, you know
Uh
how it is. You know how
yeah.
these guys, people like come off of shows or come off of diets, whatever it is, like whether you're a bodybuilder or not, you do a diet, you get lean, you come off, like you do pretty good 6 days out of the week, 5 days out of the week, and then you have the 1 or 2 days where you you're going over and you're like, how's this weight coming on? It's like 500 calories extra a week. I mean, that adds up. A year later, you're like, oh crap, man, I'm up 6, 7 pounds.
And
It's easy to do.
and
So there needs to be accountability with it.
I'm not sure, like, this was one of my questions for you, like how much you stay up to date on, like, things like body weight gain and stuff like that. But well, Eric Helms, obviously, Eric, he had his new kind of paper that kind of talked about, like, hey, that slower rate of gain is where we want to be. And like you said, in the past it was like, oh, just shovel food in, you're going to build more muscle. But really that just leads to a lot of extra fat gain for not any extra muscle at that point.
So it's context dependent. I think when you're younger, you're just starting out. It's like you can be more
Yeah.
assertive, gaining like little faster. Take advantage of the gains there, the newbie gains. But I mean, if you're 10 years into lifting, 15 years, 20 years into lifting, it's like, okay, how much more like rate of gain you think's going to happen at this point? You can't force feed the muscle. It's like training's the stimulus, make sure that's productive, just have enough food in there to support it. So even if you're hanging out the same body weight and your training is productive over time, you're probably going to see some improvements. And it's not going to show on the scale. Like even if you gained 1 pound of muscle in a year, like how do you measure that on a scale? You can't. So it's like you just have to like have faith, like, okay, let me make sure my training is productive, eat enough to support it. But you have to weigh that out. Like, because sometimes if you try to, like, even with like training volume, like people think, okay, more food, but also more training volume. I'm doing more now. Like, you get really aggressive. Sure, maybe you might see a little bit more, a faster rate of progress, but what's the risk there? On the diet side, I'm fat. Now you're fat. Now I want to diet down. So it's like you're just in this cycle. Or on the training side, I'm doing too much now. For how long is that going to last to where you're like, okay, now you're like me, you're dealing with some injury or aches and pains. So you have to think about the back end. The front end, you might get something out of it, but on the back end, are you going to get something out of it? And looking at it from someone like myself who's been doing it for 38 years now, it's like if you're in year 5 or year 10, you still have like a couple decades or 3 decades ahead of you to continue to try to keep yourself going. So you don't need to like have 5 pounds of muscle every single year. Like extend it out. Think of it like you're in an airplane taking off. Like you want your runway to be pretty long, so you're not basically pulling up on the handle and you're like making your passengers throw up because you're basically launching
Straight
up
up.
like a rocket. Yeah. You want that ride to be smooth, man. I want to have my drink and my pretzels without them going all over the floor.
Yeah, I think most people, they, like you said, it's like you can make it go a little bit quicker, but again, is that going to be, best for you? And like you said, 5 years, down the line, or shoot, even even shorter than that too. So kind of be thinking about things a little bit on a, longer time scale. So you said, you like to usually about 15, 20-ish pounds over your stage weight. Do you just try to get there as soon as you can, or do you kind of try to, I know you guys, 3D 3D MJ, coined the recovery diet, right? So do you typically just try to get there as soon as you can, or do you, try to kind of slowly get up to that 185 or that 180, low 180 mark there with that?
And I'd say the middle. Like I don't want to like come out the gates like bad out of hell. I'm just forcing food in. Now all of a sudden I'm like 15 pounds up a week later. Like that's not going to feel too pleasant.
Right.
But I don't want to prolong it either. Like I don't think there's any advantage. Like, okay, it took me 2 years to get 15 pounds. It's like because it's more about like you getting to a point where your energy levels are good, your overall mood is good, your performance is good, recovery is good. Like you're just in a sense you're fully recovered from basically taking yourself down to like extreme levels of body fat. Like even if you were to like reverse diet, right? That's what's super popular. Like let me just slowly increase these calories. Like I'm up 4 pounds, but it's 6 months later. Like even if your calories are up 1,000, are you still gonna feel like you're dieted because you're just too lean still and your training is probably not going to be very productive anyway. So it's like
Yeah.
middle ground there. And I think when we talk about recovery too, like the way I see it is not just from my perspective, but if I spent the entire year, all of 2023 was more about my bodybuilding. My family like catered to that. So they need to recover from it more than I do. It's like, it's like, hey, I can only eat 100 extra calories this week. Sorry, guys, we can't go out to dinner yet. Like that's not fair either. So I think it from that perspective as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it too, right? The family's got to recover from your prep as well too, not just you there with that. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so it's kind of finding that happy medium of like, hey, you're not trying to get up there super quick, but you're also not going to prolong that process that either. So it sounds like, with your off season now, kind of the focus is again, kind of getting to that body weight where you feel good. And then, just kind of hovering around there, making sure training's good. You're recovering, is, you're on point with from a recovery standpoint and really there, that's kind of checking the boxes versus, trying to gain, weight. Is that something that like, I know we kind of just hit on this, but you said at the beginning, you probably do want to focus on, having some time there to take care of those newbie gains, maybe you do gain weight, but do you find that over time that's something that you think somebody should do where again they should kind of maybe slow down and just focus on getting to that kind of around that body weight where they feel good and instead of focusing on adding a ton of weight and
I
surpluses.
think often people, not everybody, but there's a lot of people out there that over strategize, like trying to gain muscle. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna graph this out. I'm gonna gain X amount every month or every week or what have you. They get up to their top weight that they're like, oh, I hit this goal. Like let's just say it's 200 pounds. I hit 200 pounds. Then it's like, okay, now I'm going down. Then they immediately start cutting. It's like, well, you just hit that top end weight that might be very advantage for you. That might be advantageous for you. So why go all the way down again now? It's like just stay there for a while. As long as it's a healthy weight, of course.
Yeah.
Like you're well fed, plenty of body fat now. Your leverages are probably good. You're probably pretty pliable, probably happy. It's like just now you just train. Like just train, let it be productive, keep recovering and reap the rewards from it. And then when the time does come down the road after that, it's like, okay, now you bring it down. But looking at a graph, most times people's graphs like vary up and down instead of being more stretched out. So it's like, okay, maybe gain for 6 months, slow. Doesn't need to be super fast. Gain for 2 or 3 months, maintain, maybe gain again, maintain again, then maybe come down after that. And then
Yeah.
because usually like if you look at it from a 2 or 3 year process, doing that, like your body comp, like probably the starting point and the ending point 2 years later, it's probably going to look kind of the same. Let's say it's 180 and 180 again 2 years later. That 180 is going to probably look far superior the second time around.
Yep. Yeah, not comparing that initial 180 to again that if you've been training, lifting weights, building muscle like that other 180 is going to look a lot different.
And think about the behaviors of the up and down graph, right? Bulk, cut. Like you can get some pretty wacky behaviors with that. Then if your graph is looking a little bit more conservative over a 2 year stretch, like your behaviors are going to look just like that. It's going to be
Yeah.
more sustainable, more practical, and you're going to be able to do that for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Like my graph, I look back at my 20 and 30-year graph. It's like up and down, up and down. So like the last couple of years or so, it's been pretty even keeled.
What was the heaviest you ever got during your
Oh
bodybuilding
my
career?
gosh, yeah, the sloppy 230. Like I've hit 213 on a couple of occasions. The first time I did it, it was more purposeful, not the best of foods. And then the second time I did it, it was when I was actually 212, but it was when I stopped training for about 4 months because my wife is going to have the baby. I had to try to organize everything, get everything situated. So training just became very low on the totem pole. So I stopped training, stopped worrying about my diet too. So it was like no training, bad diet, worst body comp of my life. It was like the worst 212 ever. So when you have a body comp like that, you actually lose muscle. Then when you have a workout that you miss, like I didn't get enough sleep, I'm not going to train tomorrow. Like I don't trip on that because I know what true atrophy looks like and
Right.
regression looks like. So, or a week off to spend with the family on vacation. I got to get to the gym and your family's like, come on, you're going to spend 2 hours at the gym. We're going to supposed to be going to the beach. I don't trip off a missed week.
Right. Yeah. That muscle loss takes a lot longer than just a day or a missed session. Which I know a lot of people could probably take that advice and listen to it. I know I used to be that way, right? Where it was like, man, no way I'm taking a deload week or I got to get my workout in. And I think
Same.
it's just super nice to not have to stress about that. Like you said, you can go hang with the fam on vacation. You don't have to stress about hitting all your workouts, while you're on vacation. And again, I think that leads to long term, like you're able to stick to it long term now because you don't have to stress about all those like little
Mhm.
variables like that.
For sure.
I did have one of my clients, he was wanting me to bring you on here, and we were just kind of talking about just training tips like in your 30s and 40s. Like, do you and beyond, like, what are some things that you think are important, and like what are some things to kind of look out for, as you kind of advance, as you get into your late 30s, 40s, stuff like that from a training perspective.
Your ego. Sometimes when you get a little older, you still think you're 20. Like, no, man, you're not 20 anymore. You need to kind of rethink how you approach it. But on the flip side, it could be the opposite. Some people don't push themselves hard enough. So it just depends on the person. But yeah, it's like I know the ego, even like in my early 40s, like it still was getting me. And that's how I got a calf tear. It was more so because of the ego. So it's a lot of the approach. Like oftentimes you get older, hey, what's the key to your longevity? Like is it the foam rolling, the stretching, all this stuff?
Yep.
I'm like, no, it's not. It's more the approach. Like just understanding that it's still a long game. Even though you're 40, you still have 10 probably pretty productive years, maybe even into your 50s still, where you can be pretty productive. And you still want to be doing this when you're 60, 70. So what you do now matters. Your 70-year-old self is going to be like, why are you doing this to me? Don't need to do 5 sets here, man. Just do two. This is what your body's telling you today. 2 sets is enough. And then get your 7 or 8 hours sleep and then come back and do it again tomorrow.
So when you say ego, does that look like because I hear ego and I think it's like, oh, you're just trying to just load the bar, load the weight on the bar and try to lift as much as possible. But you also kind of said like 5 sets. So does it kind of look
It
like
it could be,
volume?
yeah, it could be like load, it could be more reps, it could be like more sets, more volume you're trying to do. Like usually it's like it's meant like your mentality, your approach is probably the most important thing because we don't listen to our body sometimes. Like I know I wasn't, especially on that day. I could remember that vividly. Like I was squatting, and it just felt horrible. Like just felt like crap. And I'm like, nah, just keep pushing. So I kept pushing myself. Leg curls, same thing, didn't feel that great. And on calf raises, Smith machine. So it's like usually every week it's over 500 pounds for reps. I know it's crazy. And this like the first set just felt god awful. And I'm like, man, okay, I was smart enough though. I'm like, let me take 50 pounds off of this. Second set, about third or fourth rep in, my calf just tore. It was just the ego. Like I was like, did not want to slow down because I wanted to keep pushing myself for more progress. And even I remember like in my 20s and even in my 30s, being sick, but yet still training, like being sick to the point where I probably shouldn't train, but I was fearful of losing out, missing out on something, pushed myself. And yeah, 9 times out of 10, the next day I was like, wow, man, I feel way worse, way worse.
Yep. Yeah, I've been there too. It's like, oh, don't feel great, but I got to get it in. I don't want to miss out on those gains. But like we talked about, it definitely is not the case. And again, you got to be thinking, the long game with it. What about from like a training intensity perspective? Do you like kind of follow like reps in reserve or RPE or anything like that?
I definitely don't wouldn't say I train more than two or three in the tank. Like it's most of my sets are either 0 to 2
Okay.
more times than not. I mean, the ones I go to 0, it's like the safe exercises. Like I'm not doing squats to 0 or anything or deadlift. But yeah, I've always been more on the intense side of things. I just feel like you're getting more bang for your buck. Like if you ask someone, okay, today's the last day you can work out on planet Earth, how are you going to train? Chances are you're probably going to push yourself pretty hard.
5 reps in reserve, just hold it back.
Yeah, it's like so it's like I in my mind I don't when I train I don't think like how many is that? How many is that? I kind of just think of like can I do another one? Yeah, I could do another one. If I can't, okay, I can't. So that's one in the tank. And then if I make it just a little bit easier, that's probably two. But it's hard like when you're interviewing somebody about this, it's different than actually watching someone train.
Yeah.
When you watch someone train, then you can kind of tell like you're saying that's two in the tank, but it's really like you got so much more in there. And then it could be the flip side too. Like some people you're like, man, you're going like probably a little too ham. You need to back off a little bit before you snap something.
So again, kind of just finding that again, auto regulating basically is kind of how you're at this point. But you said most of the time you're going to train, 0 to 2 reps in reserve on most things.
And I think from a principle standpoint, like we know like 5 to 30, right? That's what they kind of say in the research. Like, okay, if I'm doing something with 5 reps, I can probably leave 3 or 4 in the tank and I'm probably going to get a stimulus because the load is heavy enough to tap into enough muscle fiber. But if I'm doing 30 reps, like I'd probably never even do 30 reps because I don't think I'd even trust myself to actually go to true failure because you're just going to get more winded than anything. So if I'm hitting somewhere in, let's say 15 to 20 reps, I better go to failure at least on one set to ensure I am getting an adequate stimulus.
Yeah.
So I kind of look at it from perspectives, like where's my rep range out, where I need to be as far as like how close to true failure I need to be. So it's either like I'm right at failure or I'm just almost barely getting there. That's kind of how I look at it, just to kind of simplify it.
Yeah. Do you like track your number? I know you kind of mentioned like again, you like to kind of go off the field. Do you kind of track like your numbers and reps just to get an idea, or is that again something that you just kind of auto regulate based off how it feels that day and things like that?
I've done both over the years. This last prep, I did track up until a certain point, and I remember at some point in the prep, I got pretty stressed. I didn't want, like I said, I didn't want to track anything. It was like, to me, it was like white noise because I know, and I'm not focused on the numbers per se because your brain is the only thing that knows numbers. Your muscles don't. So I'm like, whether I hit 10 reps this week or 9 reps last week, as long as I'm close to failure or at failure, I'm getting a stimulus regardless. The only time I would be concerned about not hitting numbers is seeing numbers like trend down.
Yeah.
Like every week it's going down, down, down. That's a red flag. Okay, why is it happening? Lack of sleep? Is it diet? Is it stress? Whatever. Troubleshoot it. But I'm not a numbers guy. Like I use numbers as a guide, but I'm not like married to numbers because I know it's more about principles than anything.
Yeah, no, that's again, I mean, this is years of experience here, with you getting all this. Would you
But
say like,
the logbook is a good tool though. Like someone who's new, intermediate, it's a good tool. I mean, it's to me, I kind of just look at a logbook. If you're logbooking, it's a tool that's going to ensure you are giving enough effort. Because if you're like, okay, I did 8 last week, I'm gonna try to get 9. So you're incentivized to push.
yep,
Whereas if you're not, like you've seen those guys in the gym. I used to go to commercial gym for years, and you're like, "Hey Bob, how you doing?" "I'm doing good, Jeff." And it's like they're doing the same things over and over and over again. They look the same.
yeah, yeah. So it sounds like there, it's like, hey, and that's kind of why I wanted to mention, you're going off of your experience here because again, you have those, the training principles, but you've also practiced them, so you have them down. Like for some people, like you said, it's probably a good idea to, at least track it for a little bit and look at that logbook to make sure that you are progressing. And
Yeah,
like you said, it helps you get that extra rep sometimes
that's your
and
data.
whatnot.
That's your data you need to when you do get more experience. That's what's led you to that experience.
Yeah.
That's where you kind of have the understand. Like when I work with athletes, yeah, I have them log and track like numbers, but I also ask them, like, I want to know how you feel when you're experiencing, like, okay, you hit 10 reps, it was 2 in the tank, let's say, or 1 in the tank, or what have you, but how did it actually feel? Like, was it
Mhm.
hard? Was your form on point? Like, those types of things. Did you recover from that training session? So you can look in the spreadsheet, see numbers, and on paper it looks great. Like, hey, it's going up, but it could either feel great doing it or not so much.
I recently had this conversation with my coach about this where like I felt like towards I do this from time to time where I felt like towards the end it was like I just was kind of trying to I focused too much on trying to beat previous week's numbers versus like kind of going off of feel. And I find that anytime I do that, that's when I start to notice some like elbow pain and just like things just don't
Mhm.
feel as great because you just try to beat that logbook and just try to beat that number instead of kind of going off of how you feel. Like you said, like how did that actually feel? So I always, I have to recalibrate myself on that all the time.
Yeah, because you can hit a target and then you're plateaued. At least you think you're plateaued. But let's say you spend the next month or two and you're just doing the same thing over. You feel like you're not doing anything, but all of a sudden you're noticing your form is getting a little better. You're actually moving a little faster, cleaner. So that's a form of progress that you just can't really see on a spreadsheet.
Yep.
Like have you probably seen it? Like, do you record your video your exercises at all?
I,
So you,
I not as regularly as I should, but I do try to do it fairly
yeah.
consistently.
So I think if you look at lifts, let's say a year, 2 years ago, and you look at them and you compare it to now, you're probably like, whoa. Like you're like it might maybe the load's the same or maybe just a little bit more, but you're like, man, it just looks so much better now.
Yeah, there's been a lot of times. I don't know if this is the case for you. There's been a lot of times where like, I'll be doing a lift and I'm like, man, I feel like I used to be like way stronger on this or used to do a lot more. But then like I think back and I'm like, well, what did that look like, at that time, and
Yeah.
like you said, that can be a form of progressive overload right there. And if anything, if you are my thought on this is, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it is from a
Mhm.
hypertrophy perspective, if you can get more out of a lift with less weight, I would say that's, going to be helpful from a long-term injury management standpoint and just kind of staying consistent. Now, again, that doesn't mean go light with it, but I think
Right.
be curious to hear your thoughts on that. If
It can be. Yeah. I mean, on the flip side, I don't know, let's say you're doing a curl, then, you're doing 20 pounds for like the next 10 years and
right,
your reps, you got a 10-second rep speed or 20-second rep speed. It's like, is that creating more hypertrophy? I mean, you better be going like to failure though, or close to it.
yep.
So it's like, I guess we could nuance it both ways. Like we could probably make it seem favorable one way or the other.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a good point, right? Because like you said, you can definitely take it too far, and then now you're doing super slow eccentrics, and it's like, okay, that's
Yeah.
probably not great either. So you
But I
definitely,
do. Yeah, but I do use that a lot now that I'm older because if I try to lift maximally, like load wise, like, yeah, I get more joint pain. So I kind of have to figure out ways to create a stimulus. And what I like to use is pre-fatigue. Like I'll take a leg extension before a leg press, so that way the leg press, I don't have to load it as much. I'll use slower rep speed, like slower eccentrics. I'll pause things, so that way I don't have any momentum or leveraging. um, Control the concentric a little bit more if I need to. But always like I try to ensure, like regardless of rep speed or what have you, it's like let me make sure I'm getting to the correct proximity to failure. I mean,
You
that's probably like the one thing I'm like a little more focused on than anything else.
just making sure you're taking that target muscle relatively close to failure, and that's kind of the
I'm
big thing
pushing
there.
my effort. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's like, hey, what's the perfect volume? What's the, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I mean, look, it doesn't really matter if, like, I mean, where's that training intensity at? You know what I mean? I mean, that's super important. So do you take form videos pretty regularly as well for yourself to, kind of make sure technique's there, intensity's there and everything like that?
Yeah, that's part of the job as far as like being a coach. You have to put yourself out there, and social media is not the most favorite thing I do. But the good thing is I do record a lot of my sets. I don't always post them all, but yeah, I do. I like actually when I'm training, I'll look at it and see if there's anything I need to clean up. But I don't know. My form, I would say it's like pretty flawless, most exercises. Some people will say, man, it doesn't need to be that perfect. And the way I used to look at form, I used to like, if you would have asked me this 10 years ago, I would probably tell you, like, if someone is using a little bit of momentum or leveraging, I'd be like, oh man, we need to really clean that up. The way I look at it now is like, it's more of a style. As
Yeah.
long as your form, your technique is standardized and it's safe for you, like it's all good. Because I don't like we can look across the board at all the types of different bodybuilders. Like, man, that guy's got some pretty sloppy movements, but he's still jacked. Then you look at someone who's like really pristine on their form and they're jacked. So it's like it's more about just standardizing and making sure you're safe. That's the way I kind of look at it now.
And I would imagine probably take into consideration, like, again, how are they feeling, right? If that person who has like not great technique, or not, I don't want to say not great technique, but he's maybe swinging a little bit more on certain lists, but it's like, if he's feeling good, he's progressing, his body doesn't hurt. It's like, hey, that works for you, keep it going. Now
Hmm.
on the flip side, if he was like getting all this joint pain and he wasn't able to push for long term, that's where, you'd probably want
We
to
need to
jump in
change
there.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when you, as a coach, when I watch form video, like if I'm watching it, let's say with you together, I'll ask you, okay, we're watching it, but tell me what you're experiencing. What are you trying to accomplish while doing this? So you kind of pick up cues through the verbal and through the visuals, and then we kind of try to tweak things based on that. Whereas before in the past, I would just look at it visually and go, like, make a judgment, like, ooh, that looks terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like maybe, but yeah, that's how I kind of look at form now. It's more of a style.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, finding what works for you. And again, I'm sure on the flip side on that, with a guy that has the perfect technique, again, if he's not progressing, it's like, all right, hey, maybe we do want to, kind of throw some of this in there. I have a couple more questions for you. I couldn't not ask this one. I'm sure you've heard this all over social media. So have you incorporated anything, like, what are your kind of thoughts around like length and partials, stuff like that? You kind of try to stay away from or stay out of that conversation, or like, yeah, what does that kind of look like for you? Is that something you've tried to incorporate in your training, or you maybe always have kind of done that, just without actually labeling it that? Or
I mean, yeah, I mean, I've done partials. I mean, I've been training for a long time, so I've had some partials. It wasn't like, hey, I got to do these partials because there's more hypertrophy in the lengthened position versus the shortened position. Like I didn't know about that back then, but it was just instinctively and naturally I kind of did it. When it first came out, I was kind of like skeptical, of course. Like, well, let me think about this for a second. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do all my back exercise with just partials.
yeah,
So just slowly but surely, I've kind of like adopted some of it. And the way I've incorporated was, okay, on my last set, let's say on a pull down, on my last set, let me do the like full range of motion, as many as I can, and then I'll just finish out with partials. Because in my mind, I'm like, where am I going to stop that
yeah,
range of motion? Like, because when in the beginning of a set, you got a lot of energy. It's like you're going to have to mindfully and purposely stop it somewhere. Whereas if you're fatigued, that fatigue is just naturally going to stop it for you. So that kind of helped me to kind of gauge where my range of motion should be on those partials.
yeah,
So maybe now every once in a while I'll do a last set where it's just nothing but partials. But I don't do like, let's say I'm doing 3 sets of pull downs. Not every set is partials
yeah.
from start to finish because yeah, I just feel like I still need to have that full range of motion in there.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like very similar to how I view it. It's like, hey, get some in there, but again, you still want to train, mostly through full range of motion and don't, neglect any part overall. So what about from like a exercise perspective? Is there anything that you're kind of that you've been liking, anything new that you've added in over the last couple of years from an exercise selection standpoint or anything like that?
Yeah. I'm learning to like split squats now. I hated them. Like I just like I've never been a split squat fan because I was just like, hey, I'll just rather do leg press or hack squat or squat or whatever. But now, because I can't do those things, like the only thing I can do is a split squat. So I could either hate it with that mentality or hey, let me embrace this. And then so now I'm embracing it and I'm like, I'm starting to kind of like them now. So who knows, man? And you never know. Like when the calf tear happened, it was like, oh shit, like my mind when it first happened, it was like, oh shit, my career is over. I don't know how I'm gonna like to train. It was that devastating to me. And so it's like, oh shit, after that, like I learned a whole new approach to training, had my best year as a pro the following year. So it's like, okay, I'm dealing with this injury now. Well, maybe these split squats, maybe it does something to my legs that maybe I've never seen before.
Yeah. So,
Maybe it doesn't, but we'll find out. So it's kind
so
of it's the unknown.
So just kind of like regular split squat or like heel elevated Bulgarian split squat, or what are you kind of looking
I
at there with
started
this?
flat. I started out flat, and then yesterday I actually used a 45-pound plate, so it's a little bit of a deficit, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to get a little because I wasn't sure like how I was going to feel in my lower back, so I just
Yeah.
started out just on flat on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any single leg stuff freaking sucks. So good luck. Good luck with that. Have fun.
Mm.
Have fun with
Hmm.
that.
Right, right, right. Gotta
I get
embrace it.
I guess last question for you. What do you have any like muscle groups that maybe for you like you've had to work a little bit harder to build? Do you maybe have to do a little bit more volume on them? And just to kind of wrap that one up, is there any muscle groups that you're specifically working on like right now, or you kind of just try to always go with like a pretty balanced approach overall?
I've always had a fairly balanced approach. Like as a like once I turned pro, I had a weak back. That's probably the one area that was weak, where it's like, oh, okay, I really need to bring this up. And I remember when I was bringing it up, it wasn't like, let me throw more volume on it. I actually took a step back and it's like, why is my back weak? And then when I looked at the form videos, I was like, I was ego lifting bent over rows. But instead of being bent over rows, more like an upright row. It's just too heavy of a load. So like, okay, let me look at exercise selection. Let me look at the execution of that. And over time, my back improved just through that. Like I realized I didn't have to throw a bunch of volume at it. I just needed to learn how to train it properly. At the moment, I'm just trying to recover from the injury. So I don't have any
Right.
emphasis on trying to improve anything. And even at this age, it's like, I'm not saying I can't improve, but I just don't know. Like if I was to attempt to, and if I did, let's say put more volume on certain body parts, because my form on most things is really good. So it's like, okay, is it going to be worth it? Is it going to like make aches and pains, that type of thing? So I'm kind of just treating my physique as more of a balanced approach. But I will say this, because I work with a lot of athletes and I've tried to improve body parts and some people here and there. Sometimes it's the quality work, sometimes more volume. I've seen that work really well, more frequency. That's worked really well. I've also seen the opposite, where you put more volume on one body part to improve it, you bring down the volume on another strong body part, and the strong body part actually starts to take off more so. So it's like,
Yep.
so I've seen all kinds of different things. But I can tell you this with my physique personally. Like if I look back when I first started competing, my physique looks the same as it does now. I'm just a bigger version of myself. So even though I've had, let's say, emphasis on like bringing my back up or whatever, like shape wise, everything balance wise, it all kind of looks relatively the same. So it's like I've seen that too, where it's like I'm trying to get someone's body parts to improve. Like, yes, their body parts improved, but so did everything else. So now it's just like bigger version of the same thing.
It's yeah, right. You try to bring up one muscle group and then everything else just ends up coming up just as much. And so it's still
Yeah.
it's still the same thing.
And think from a like a competitive standpoint too, like you can actually improve a body part backstage before getting out on stage. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
just
pump the shit out of my delts right
yeah,
now, and
delts.
all of a sudden my medial delts look like a half inch wider because you're just super pumped, and it
Yeah.
improves your overall look, your overall taper.
And especially with delts too, that's going to be one that, like you said, gives you that taper as well too. Yeah, and I can definitely
Yeah.
see that being one that really
Hmm.
gets hit from like the pump and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned though. It's not always just throwing more volume on it. If you do have something like that, it is looking at exercise selection, looking at intensity. execute.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all going to be super important before you just throw volume on. But like you said, hey, in some cases, it may be a volume thing as well too there where you do need to throw that on. So cool, Jeff. We'll really appreciate your time. Ton of great wisdom and everything in here. I think people will be able to take a lot away from the training talk and everything like that. So again, appreciate your time. Is there anywhere where you want to lead the audience to or anything like that?
You can go to Instagram, 3DMJ_Godfather, 3dmusclejourney.com.
Cool. Yep. And I know you're always posting training videos as well too. So, get if you want to see some good technique and good execution, definitely go check out Jeff's Instagram and yeah, see how he's able to continue to progress, as you age. That's awesome. I love to see it. I think that's super cool. Again, you're not old by any means, but it's super cool to be able to see that, you're still sticking with it and still progressing. So keep it up and we'll have to get you back on here again, Jeff.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.